About 4 years ago, I sowed close to 100 tomato and pepper seedlings indoors in starter pots in anticipation of the upcoming spring and summer garden season. And everything seemed fine at first. I had a great germination rate. All my seedlings seemed healthy and happy for a few weeks. And then one day I came home from work and found most of those seedlings lying on their sides, looking as though some malevolent garden Grinch had broken into my house when I wasn't there and gleefully pinched off almost every single last seedling. I'd been the victim of a condition called damping off. This is caused by a fungal infection that results in the collapse of the stem and the death of the seedling. I had made a number of rookie mistakes that year, and it honestly, making those mistakes killed most of my seedlings. So today I'm going to go over what those mistakes were and how to avoid that fate of losing most of your seedlings. The dreaded condition known as damping off is actually caused by a number of soil-borne fungi. It's everywhere, and probably including that bag of soil starting mix that you just bought at the big box store. That's why I always sterilize my seed starting mix by popping it in the oven at a low heat until it hits a temp of maybe 180 degrees or so. Doing this will greatly cut down on fungal spores in your mix while offering the added bonus of destroying fungus gnat eggs. Fungus gnats are benign but really annoying, so cutting down on those isn't ever a bad thing. Now, if I'm reusing starter pots or cups, I'll sterilize them by soaking them in a mild bleach solution for a bit. I'll even sterilize my seeds by giving them a quick soak in hydrogen peroxide before sowing. Is all of this overkill? Maybe, but I'd rather take the extra time and precaution if it means more plants make it to transplant. It's really better safe than sorry. This one is really my personal preference, but I really like starting my tomatoes and peppers in larger starter pots as opposed to using the small cell packs. When I use the small cell packs, I always end up having to pot everything up in a few weeks anyway as the plants get big, and that's really extra work that I don't think I have to do. Additionally, larger pots take longer to dry out, meaning less watering. I find that 16 to 18 ounce drink cups are sufficient. They're indefinitely reusable, but their top-heavy nature can be a real pain at times. Just remember to poke drainage holes in the bottom before planting. I'm not anti-peat pot. In fact, I often rely on them in other types of plantable starter pots when I need to start plants indoors that are a bit prone to transplant shock. Now, tomatoes and peppers are not really prone to transplant shock, but they are sensitive to over and underwatering. My experience with peat pots is they make it hard to regulate moisture. I find that either the papery material wicks moisture from the starter mix, causing frequent drying, or the pots become saturated and mold over. Additionally, plantable pots are harder to sterilize than plastic. Now, I personally have had limited success placing my starter pots near a sunny south-facing window. The sun in late winter, early spring, which is when I typically want to start my peppers and tomatoes, is still very low on the horizon, and it isn't really up for that long. So seedlings, given only this weak winter light, will start to grow really long and spindly with weak stems as they try to reach that low on the horizon sun. These weak stems make the plants more prone to that, or more susceptible rather, to that fungus that causes damping off. While there is an investment cost involved, I've found grow lights have dramatically improved the quality of my tomato starts. Now, because no grow light will ever be as strong as real sun, I recommend keeping the lights on for about 16 hours a day and keeping the lights really close to the seedlings, maybe no more than 2 or 3 inches above it at all times. I run them overnight when power is typically cheaper. As a gardening newbie, I would typically sow 1 seed per starter pot, and then a few weeks later end up with a whole bunch of empty pots taking up room on my grow light shelf due to the imperfect germination rate of most seeds. Now, newly produced packets of tomato seeds will typically have a germination rate of about 85%. So if you sow 10 pots with 1 seed a pot, you're probably going to end up with somewhere between 1 and 3 empty starter pots. Sow 2 seeds per pot, and you probably won't end up with any empty pots. I know it sucks to thin a perfectly good tomato seedling, but ultimately an individual seed is cheap. Time, however, is irreplaceable. Also keep in mind that germination rates diminish with age. So if you're planting seeds from a 5-year-old seed packet, it might not be a bad idea to sow 3 to 4 per pot. Seeds do contain enough of their own nutrients to nourish a newly emerged sprout. But once the first set of true leaves form, you're really going to need to feed that plant. This can be accomplished by either adding a little bit of granular fertilizer to your seed starting mix, or after the fact, making up some kind of fertilizer tea or other water soluble fertilizer. Always apply fertilizer in accordance with the label and be mindful of odor. A lot of fertilizers, they kind of smell like a mix between dead fish and raw butthole, which is usually fine for outdoor applications, but it's probably not what you want to be smelling in your spare bedroom where you're keeping your seed starting rack. A worm casting tea is a decent low odor option. I'm of the opinion that ideally tomatoes should have sufficiently damp roots, but bone dry stems and leaves. Obviously, this isn't always doable outdoors, but inside we have a lot more control over environmental conditions. Moisture facilitates the growth of fungus and bacteria, and fungus and bacteria are kryptonite for tomatoes. Since tomatoes and peppers are typically sowed very shallow, maybe 1/4 to a half inch in depth, you are going to need to do a little bit of top watering in the beginning just to keep that very surface layer of starter mix damp enough for germination. However, once the seedlings emerge, that typically means that the roots are down a little deeper. That's when you can switch to bottom watering, where you just pour water into the tray that is holding all of your starter cups, and capillary action will pull moisture up into the pot where it needs to be. The subject of moisture brings us then to our next mistake, which is not using a fan. Setting up a fan to provide seedlings with a gentle breeze will have a twofold benefit. It will help thicken and strengthen stems, which decreases instances of damping off, while also helping to prevent a condition called edema. Edema occurs when a plant cannot effectively aspire moisture, leading to cell rupture. This is fairly common under grow lights, and while a plant can recover from a mild case, a more severe case of edema is a death sentence. The addition of a fan to a seed starting setup goes a long way to combat edema. Because triple digit temperatures often arrive in my region by Memorial Day weekend, I like to make sure my transplants are as mature as reasonably possible by the time it's safe to put them outdoors, which is usually sometime during the first half of April. Last year, however, I completely overdid the whole starting early game and sowed my tomato and pepper seeds at the end of January and the beginning of February. By late February and early March, my starts were taking over my grow shelf and getting way too big for their starter pots. They were also showing signs of ill health, including yellowing leaves and edema, which is exacerbated by the crowded conditions created by large starts on small grow racks. Once tomatoes hit a certain size, they're going to need real sunlight and more root space. If they hit this size before outdoor conditions are hospitable to tomatoes, meaning nights in the no cooler than maybe the mid to upper 40s and soil temps at least in the 60s, problems will ensue. While growth rates will vary somewhat depending on everyone's individual seed starting setup, they probably won't need more than a 6 to 8 week lead on the season. Now, I don't want to give the impression that I think my seed starting methods are the be all and end all of seed starting, nor am I implicitly deriding anyone who takes a different approach. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who swear by using peat pots in a south-facing window and they're perfectly happy with the results. That said, my experience has been that avoiding the previously mentioned mistakes has greatly increased the number of seedlings that make it to transplant for me. No matter what seed starting approach you take, though, I'm wishing everyone a healthy and productive spring and summer gardening season this year. And of course, until next time, let's hope it all doesn't die.